Hello everybody, it is 3:30, which of course means it is time for one of our afternoon STEM shows here at the Headwaters Science Center. I'm Ryan, one of the educators here. And today we have something kind of cool to talk about here because, let's see, not yesterday but the day before, we got a big donation of some new materials here at the Headwaters Science Center. And so you can see all this stuff behind me here. We have a bunch of taxidermied heads, we have some horn and antler mounts, we have some interesting animal skulls behind me here. And so I think I wanted to talk a little bit about like what the process is if somebody were to be interested in donating something like this, what that looks like from your end and our end here at HSC. And so generally anything that gets donated to the Headwaters Science Center, the first place it's going to go is going to be kind of in the back room here where I am right now. It's kind of our loading, unloading kind of bay in the back here. So when it comes to like actually bringing something in, this tends to be the first stop for a lot of stuff. And like I said, this stuff's been back here for a couple days now before it makes its next stop, wherever it's going to go next. And so basically the story on this is we had a gentleman who called and said he was looking to donate a whole bunch of stuff. And so Angie, one of our other educators, and then Lee, our executive director, both went and visited his house and checked out all these materials and decided that it was something that would potentially be valuable here at the Headwaters Science Center for us to actually use for collections, for displays and things like that. And the thing with this in particular that they found really interesting was that a lot of the stuff you're seeing behind me is stuff that is not local to Minnesota. It's a lot of very exotic materials. Specifically, there's a lot of stuff from Africa here, including, except we have I think is an oryx skull here, so it's like an African antelope. And basically everything directly behind me is from somewhere that's not North America. And so from there's usually some sort of, I hesitate to use the term like negotiation process, but it's kind of a negotiation process there where, like I said, the stuff that we really wanted for the most part is the stuff that's behind me here. It's all these exotic materials. We wanted to be able to say, hey, we have a collection of taxidermies and skulls and antlers and stuff from Africa. But that's not the only thing that this guy was looking to get rid of. He had a bunch of things like, if you look over to my left here, camera right, I guess, you'll see there's a lot of more recognizable stuff over here. So things like we have white-tailed deer here and elk and things like that, things that we already have here at HSC. And so when it comes to like things that we are like really looking to bring in, things that we're really hoping to bring in, the first question we always got to ask ourselves is this something that's actually adding to HSC? Because if it's not something that we're going to be able to use out on the exhibit floor or use in some sort of like research context down in the basement, honestly it's just stuff that's going to be taking up space. And so if somebody comes in and says, hey, do you want a bunch of white-tailed deer heads, generally we're going to say no because we have several of those already. It's redundant for us. It's not adding a whole lot. But if somebody says, hey, do you want a bunch of cool African mounts? Also, there's some white-tailed deer mixed in there that we want you to take with it. We're a little more likely to say, yeah, sure, we'll take that. And so the next process there would be, like I said, doing a little bit of a visit with them to check out the materials, make sure they're in decent shape and are usable for us. And then, the really fun part, the paperwork. And so, anytime you donate something to the Headwaters Science Center of a certain value, we have you fill out one of these forms. So it says a deed of gift to the Headwaters Science Center here. And basically what this is saying, and the guy who donated this to us, I'm not going to say his name because I'm not sure if he wants his name out there as far as having donated all this stuff, so I'm going to refrain from saying his name. But he filled out a sheet that looked basically like this one. And basically what this sheet is saying is, yes, this belongs to the Headwaters Science Center. You guys are free to do with it what you want. And so fully signed custody over to us. We become the new owners. We take a full inventory of what the items would be. We get contact info from the previous owner. And the other thing that's on here is it gets assigned a value, and then this type of stuff is tax deductible for whoever is the donor. And so assigning a value to the items gifted is another part of this. And the reason we have, the biggest reason we have people do this is one, it, like I said, helps as far as the donor because, like I said, it's tax deductible stuff, but it also helps on our end too because we have had it happen before. It's in the past at this point, but I've had it happen before where, say there's an estate, somebody has passed away, and one kid donates thing X to us, donates, you know, a taxidermy deer to us, and we say, yeah, sure, we'll take it. Then the other kid comes in and says, no, I don't want that, given, and now there's a dispute over who's the owner, and having a form like this that says, yep, it's signed over to us, keeps it in our hands, basically. So kind of the nitty-gritty as far as like the legal of it is we want to make sure that we are the actual owners and that the people who are donating understand that we are the owners and are free to do with it what we want. On occasion, we do get items in that are not ours, though. So stuff that... On occasion, we will take items on loan, though. So items that are not ours, but we're just keeping here to use for, you know, some specific amount of time in some specific context. We don't do it very often, but every once in a while we will do something like that, where we'll take in a loaner item. And we also, on occasion, loan stuff out. And you say we have paperwork for all this stuff. Where, you know, if you see something here at the center where you think it would be handy for you in some sort of work or educational context, like we loan stuff out to teachers all the time. If you saw Young Frankenstein at the theater downtown here, a number of our items were in Young Frankenstein, so we loaned out a bunch of stuff from our collections to them. And so I have on my desk upstairs one of these yellow forms that has a bunch of specimens on it that we gave to them for set dressing. They're all back now. So, like I said, it's kind of the boring paperwork into things. But once all the paperwork's filled out, once we have it in our custody, the next thing we got to do is get it documented here on our end so that, you know, we know what this stuff is, where it's supposed to be, what the plan is for it. And for that, it's going to go into the collections department, which at the moment is mostly me. And so what we're going to do with it is called accessioning it. And so what that basically means is we have a database here. There's a specific computer down in the basement at the Science Center that has a big database on it of all the items that we have down in the basement. And every item, excuse me, every item we have here has a assigned accession number to it. And the system we have here is a little atypical, I will say, as far as like the way we number our stuff here, but having accession numbers is something that's pretty much true across the board, even though, like I said, ours is not necessarily very typical. So these are a couple of the numbers that like items that you're seeing behind me might have. And so it's a coded system. And so we have, you'll see 8 in all of these. And so what 8 is that's telling us that it's an organic specimen. And this is something that is basically a plant or an animal specimen. So we have a different category. I think it's 5 would be things like mineral specimens, so rocks and stuff like that. We have a separate collection for. I don't think we have a collection here, but you might have in a lot of museums things like photo collections that would be assigned a different number. Even like audio collections would have a number. If you know we don't have one here, but that's the type of thing you would do. So that's in our system would be what the first number is telling us is kind of in the broadest category, like this is a material that is from something that was once living, basically. The second number is telling us what type of specimen it is. So you can see I have a 4 here, a 7 here, and an 8 here. And so something like this pronghorn would be a 4. And so 4 would be, it's categorized as a mount. So this is something that is a taxidermy that is kind of called a mixed media, I guess, taxidermy, where it's not just bone, it's not just fur, it's kind of the whole kit and caboodle and is kind of designed to be displayed as such, would be a number 4. A number 7, we have several of in here, and so something like this would be a number 7. And so that is something that just has like skull material for it. We have a number 7, and then there's also a category that would be like other skeletal materials, so we categorize skulls and then like body skeletons as like separate pieces. So if we had, say, like a leg bone from the same deer, it would be a different number here. I don't know what it is off the top of my head, though. And then 8 are pelts. And so we didn't get so many of the pelts here, but we did get a couple. So we have, for example, I think this is a jackal pelt that was donated to us. So this would be 8. And then the M that you can see I have on the end of all these stands for mammal. So, like I said, organic, pelt, mammal. And then this would get one more number stuck on the end of it, and it would basically just be a running count of how many mammal pelts we have, which, again, I don't know off the top of my head, but it might look something like 88M, and then, I don't know, 55 or something like that. And that would mean it was the 55th mammal pelt that we had accessioned here. And then we would also put a note on it that says something like, you know, jackal pelt or whatever it would say in the database there, so we knew what we're actually looking for. And like I said, this is a little atypical. It's not necessarily like the standard numbering system that a lot of places use. So what most museums would generally use is they start out with a date, actually. So like for this, it would be like 2021. And then all of these, because they all got donated at the same time by the same person, the second number would be the same too. So whatever was so if we were to say this was the fifth collection of items that got donated to the Headwaters Science Center this year, it would be 2021.5. And then every item in there would be individual numbered as well. So our jackal pelt might be, I don't know, 10. So, and then this would be items, 1 through 40 in here or whatever. Would be a more typical way of doing it rather than necessarily sorting them or accessioning them based on, like I said, this type of thing where you're categorizing it by the type of item. Usually it's categorized when it's acquired is more typically the way you would do it. But like I said, it's the type of documentation that you're seeing there is something that, like I said, is pretty much standard across the board for museums. I like to say that like the difference between a museum and a dump is how much paperwork we do, basically. Because we want to make sure we know where everything is. We want to make sure everything here has a purpose. We want to make sure we know where everything came from and what the intent is for it when we have it here. Because it's important for us. I do these demos, I pull stuff out of collections all the time, and it's really handy for me to be able to say, okay, I'm looking for a jarred caddisfly somewhere, and I can go to the computer down there and I can say, search for caddisfly and be like, yes, we do have it. Yes, it's part of this collection. It's roughly in this area, and then I can go and find it rather than having to just go down there and, find something in our however many square foot basement we have. We have a basement that's about as big as our main exhibit floor is, so it's a big room down there, big lot of space to lose a thing. And so having collections is what keeps us functional as far as actually being able to use the stuff in the basement, basically. But I think we'll just go through and actually highlight a couple of these items here that I think are of kind of particular interest. Put this guy back. We visited with the jackal already. So some of the items that we were looking at here when we were talking about this were stuff that we were really excited about, the type of stuff that made us be like, yes, we absolutely want this collection. Is like I said, we were mostly in it for kind of the more exotic stuff, a lot of the African stuff in particular. And so I showed you this skull earlier. Like I said, this is a skull from an animal called an oryx. That is a big, African plains antelope, basically. And I like all these big African antelopes because they're doing a lot of the same stuff, but the horns on them are so unique and different. And we don't see stuff around Minnesota that has horns very often. We have a lot of antlered stuff around Minnesota, but there's not a whole lot that has horns. So just on the basis of being able to talk about the difference between a horn and an antler, this is an interesting specimen. Being able to talk about herding behaviors of all these African animals is really interesting, because one of the things that's kind of weird with African stuff compared to here is how many different species you'll have operating together in a single herd. So you might have an oryx hanging out with an impala in a way that you wouldn't necessarily see a deer hanging out with, gosh, what's another large mammal around here? Large herbivorous mammal. Yeah, a moose. You don't see deer and moose and elk all hanging out together and bison all hanging out together really very often the same way you do all these animals over in Africa. So that's one cool element of it. Just from the perspective of, like I said, the different horn shapes is kind of interesting too, because you have a lot of animals that are kind of, differing sizes, but not drastically different weight classes here, that you're seeing a lot of very different sort of horn shapes and sizes and patterns. And so that's an interesting thing to talk about too, is why is that? Why does our oryx have such different horns than our eland? even though they're having to deal with, very much the same predators in very much the same areas and are, roughly the same size. And it's an interesting topic to talk about. And so again, when I'm talking about how we decide like what type of stuff we want to actually take into the collections, like that first question I'm always asking is this something we can use in an educational context? Is this something that's bringing a new and interesting topic for us to talk about on the exhibit floor? And so that's kind of the first perspective I always look at, and this is true when we get like live animals too. We get offered things like red-eared sliders, like the turtles, all the time. People phone us and offer to give us those, and basically we always say no because we already have one, and we don't want to just take in a bunch more because they're redundant for what we're doing out on the exhibit floor, and we only have so much space and so much time and so much food to go around here. So anytime that we're taking in anything new, living or less living, like I said, we want to make sure that we can actually make good use of it. The other one that is not in here right now that is a very cool specimen is there is a chest up mount of an animal called Kudu that is very big. It's too big for this room actually, which is why it's not in here. It's too tall to fit into this room. And so that's something that when you're coming in to keep an eye out for in the relatively near future, because it's going to have to go out on the main exhibit floor somewhere. There's only so many places we can put it because it's like 8 feet tall, and most of our ceilings aren't that high in here. It's kind of a cool one too. I think it's a Cape buffalo. So a little bit bigger, heavier type of critter than what most of the other ones are. I can tell you just from picking this skull up, it's quite a bit heftier as well. But again, interesting specimen because most of the animals that we have here are different kinds of antelope, and this is something that's a little different. It's a big bovine thing, a big cow basically that lives out on out in the African savanna. And again, there's some great specimens here too of our more North American fare. So like we have moose antlers down in the basement, but we didn't have a completely paired rack of moose antlers down in the basement. So like I said, we have moose material, but this is a new and exciting type of moose material that we didn't exactly have before. So seeing stuff like this is always fun. Ooh, I have something else that I thought was kind of cool here. There's a number of these deer skull that were designed to be mounted like flat up against a wall like this, basically. So my hand being the wall. But one of the things that's really cool about that is you get to see kind of an interesting perspective of the deer skull that you don't often get to see, where they kind of just sheared the bottom off of here, so you get to see kind of up into the brain case and nasal passage from, like I said, an angle that you really don't ever get to see. So you can see, if you, it's probably isn't going to come across on the camera, but if you even like get in here and look at it close in person, you can even see the ridges where like the wrinkles of the brain were up against the skull. This stuff here is always fun to talk about. These are called turbinates. So these are all the structures inside the nose. They're there to give surface area to the nose. So you'll see it in animals that have very good senses of smell, to add extra structure in to, or extra surface area in to help with that basically. And like I said, it's not an angle you often get to see because normally when you see a skull, you're looking at it from this side. So you can look up the nose at those turbinates and see them from one angle, but you get to see a whole different angle from this end. So it's always fun when we get new stuff like this, especially for the staff here who get to kind of have a field day as far as speculating as to what the possibilities for them are going to be going forward. It's kind of it's like Christmas for us, getting a whole big, nice new collection like this, because everybody immediately always jumps in and it's like, okay, we can do this thing and this thing and this thing with this. We're talking about stuff with the bears over there, what we might want to do with them, because we have a number of black bears now, and maybe we can figure something out with all of our black bears that we have. Like I said, all these deer, we have a number of white-tailed deer already, and we have so many more of them now. Maybe we can figure something out with those, even if we're on an individual level, not that excited about it. Just the fact that we have so many of them now opens up some possibilities as far as types of exhibits that we might want to do. especially because we have a few deer now that aren't white-tailed deer, which we didn't have before. I think all the deer we had up until now were whitetails, and now we have a bunch of specimens from deer that are not that. And so that obviously opens up some interesting possibilities too, as far as, you know, deer diversity around the world. But a little sneak peek of what's to come here at the Science Center. Like I said, we still haven't exactly nailed down like exactly what we want to do with all this stuff. Like I said, it's part of the exciting part about this type of thing is the possibilities that come with it, and we're still very much in that phase where it's mostly possibilities without a whole lot of really concrete plans yet. But hopefully you thought that was interesting for you, a little bit of a sneak peek of these new materials that we got before they actually get out onto the exhibit floor. Thank you all for watching. The Headwaters Science Center is open 7 days a week. We are open from 9:30 to 5 Monday through Saturday. We're open from 1 to 5 on Sunday, so swing by after lunch on Sunday. If you come at 3:30, we'll probably be doing one of these shows. We've been doing them pretty much every day for the last 10 months or so at this point. And so, like I said, if you swing by at 3:30 and happen to be here when we're doing a show and we're doing it out on the floor, absolutely stop by and watch and ask us a question. We might even, depending on what we're doing, have you come up and participate. So if that sounds interesting to you, absolutely come by and do that. If you're somebody who for a long time has maybe been thinking, yeah, I want to go to the Headwaters Science Center, but I'm trying to avoid crowds, this is absolutely the time of year to do that as well. Swing by on a weekday this time of year, and there's not a slower time for us. So if you're looking for less of a crowd, looking to not be in very close proximity to a lot of people, but still get your visiting in at the Headwaters Science Center, September, October, November, that's the time to do it. So like I said, swing on by. But